Hello, my name is Parker.
And my name is Ned.
And this is the Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 32. We are recording on Pi Day, March 14th. Although by the time this gets out, you will have gone through your Pi and past the Ides, and you will well be into the back half of March. Tonight, we have a number of segments, by my count, up to 4 if we are busy.
I think that's a new record for us. 4 independent segments.
4 independent segments. But our secret 0th segment, because we are both those kind of nerds, we index from 0. So there are 4 segments, but we start with the one that we always start with, the best 2 out of 3, if we have the energy for a full best 2 out of 3, which we did tonight.
Absolutely.
Ned, how was the match that we played?
It was good. It was I think a real classic, aggro versus ramp matchup where I was playing Django Turkentown and Parker, you were playing Piet Blue on a 30 HP base as opposed to Colossus, which you had been playing previously. I took it in 3 games. I will say the set 4 has been very kind to Django. There's a number of new tools that Django has gotten. That said, I think that it's still not like an oppressive deck. Like, it's a strong, fast aggro deck, but it felt nervous making in a bunch of the games where like you're really having to make your decisions well. And that's against, I'd say an aggro deck's kind of natural prey of a rampy deck that's not like putting a lot of presence on the board initially.
Yeah. I took Piet Blue to my locals last night at Guardian, Portland's home to the kind and sweaty. There are some very good players, but they're like it was fascinating. I lost quickly. I make the same mistake every season, which is to bring a late game mid range deck. Krennic, Rey. It's always every time, and I bring them in on the first week where it's just. And last night, 12 players. It was Trench, another Piet Blue, me, and 9 aggro decks, and so it was a rough scene. I think the only saving grace last night was that I got to pull off the Annihilator, which was a delight. Refine the deck list, but you've got PQ winners there, and but at the same time they're helping new players just refine walk through let's look at your list. We got 20 minutes. Why did you put this card in here? But just being super kind. I love that job. So I was already primed tonight for loss, but it was closer than it was 2 weeks ago, you and me, and I was actually pretty happy. I think I think Piet into Django is unfavored, disfavored, those matches are going to exist, and a 1-2 where at least the third match felt somewhat close. I think you got too many points on the board too early for me to recover from. But
you were getting close to turning the corner, right? Like you had the space lane locked down, but
that's where I've been just increasingly leaning is like I might even drop the resupplies. I don't think you need early ramp with Piet. I think the only ramp I'm really going to run is Architens and resupply, because I think early on you just want to lock down the ground arena, and with both pseudo taunts like Piet and other Piet and Pershing, and then also some actual taunts. Mm-hmm. And I actually think I'm going to swap out resupply for Dark Trooper. I think just locking down that early game. There's a lot of 1-3s and 1-2s and 2-2s out there that I think the Dark Trooper could be good. But I don't know. I think the reason why Django's not oppressive is we've got a couple fun. I mean, man, Dogfight put in
Dogfight. I really wanted to talk about that card. That is an amazing card.
It was
like that.
So
that did
great.
So much work for you.
Yeah, it just and especially in Piet where you're running a number of big, like the value of Dogfight is a combination of the value of surprise plus the unit you're surprising with. I'm not great at surprises, if we're being honest, but Piet is all big things. So a surprise extra Avenger or Devastator or Architect.
Yeah, those hits are just so consequential, right? Like they have these really powerful on attack triggers, which I think is a nice segue into the first segment. If you're ready to move
our
on.
first segment tonight, Ned, is our surprise segment. I have been waiting for this for a couple episodes.
Oh man, okay.
I want to talk for a little bit about joy. So it's important, right? Like everybody knows how to like get in the center of something that brings you joy. So for example, Star Wars Unlimited brings me joy, and it's pretty easy to get into the center of that. That's what you do. You get in the middle of that and you wallow. So you play a lot of SWU, you design decks, you talk about SWU, right? Like using an example. But obviously the path to optimization in life is finding two things that bring you joy and then wallowing in the center, right? Like the Venn diagram. So SWU, Star Wars Unlimited, brings me joy. Indulging in my inner child brings me joy, right? Like, which, you know, for me, like if you knew me in person, I like candy. I don't actually like, I'm a baker, but I actually prefer like Hostess to like say a homemade German chocolate cake. I like cartoons. I play games. I like Legos and video games and just indulging in all the comic books, the joys of my childhood. So that's the key to life. And I think is find those centers of Venn diagrams. Math question, because Ned, that you're our expert. Is it still a Venn diagram if there's more than one circle?
Yes.
Or more than two circles?
Yes, it is still a Venn diagram.
Okay. So in these dark and uncertain times, then the trick is to try to get, obviously then it becomes a circle stacking optimization problem, right? That's a way to phrase happiness as a math concept, right? Like, okay, right. Can you get? You
want to be in the centroid so that you're maximizing the area of the overlap between the circles, and you want to try and be in the area covered by the overlap between the most circles.
I'm gonna, what? I've spent enough time with you, Ned. I don't think the size. I think the size of the overlap is a measure of convenience. I think the number of circles is the measure of joy.
Right? Okay. No, I think that's accurate. I think that's a good note. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The more circles, the smaller the area, the harder it is to move around in there. But so the third thing that you are a near and dear friend to me, Ned. So obviously a third center or circle of joy is mild antagonization. And the center of those three circles is our newest segment, Mr. Suitcase. So I went out and I bought one of these. Now, Ned, would you describe yourself as a shiny person?
No,
right?
I am not. I just give me the heavily played, just like somebody was throwing it around on the blacktop. As long as it works, man.
As long as it works, yeah. Like crinkles, miscuts, all that. I am pretty darn close with you, Ned. I am not traditionally driven by shinies. Once I collect, I waffle around on decks because I'm a Timmy, right? That's the original overlap of the circle. So I need to generally approach a complete collection because I'm surrounded by whimsicals. But knowing that I just don't care about shinies, I think you actively dislike them.
I don't want to yuck anybody's yum. If shinies are like your thing, absolutely more power to you. I feel gross having things that are anything above the level of just functional.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, you and I are both LCG boys. Yeah. So we're just, So I bought, this is the most Star Wars thing I think I've ever done in my life. I bought this for spite. This is me letting the hate flow through me. This is, I did not buy this for me to bring more joy into my life. I bought this as like in the realm of practical jokes. You are going to watch me open this obscene
the carbonite. Why
worship. This is so much more money than I should ever spend on a thing. And here's the thing, Ned. To be fair, dear listener, I'm not going to make you and Ned watch this whole box tonight. This is a new opening segment for every episode where Ned gets to watch me open 1 and 2 packs purely. Oh man.
All right.
I'm so excited about this. I don't actually care what's in the cards. It's purely, you can't smell this, Ned, but the plastic here, like the factory smell is like, it is the taint of capitalism affecting the otherwise pure tabletop implementation. I am so excited. This is just way too much money to ever spend on a card game. If you want to watch a full box opening, I strongly recommend you go watch the Golden Dice. Brian opened 8 Carbonite boxes on stream and validated all of Ned's thoughts on why you on EV and premium
it's a
packaging.
pure negative EV play. Yeah.
So, well, if you're a content creator, then there's,
Okay,
there's
all right,
the
all right.
value of those intangibles.
Oh yeah,
of the brand.
no, we're making bank on all those 300 viewers.
So yeah, so this is as dear listener. Yep, that absolutely smells like too much money. Dear listener, this is what you've signed up for, is just two dudes on a Zoom call being buds and talking swoo, and this is the center of that Venn diagram. I am only opening this because I know Ned thinks it's a waste of money. That's literally the only reason.
It is literally a waste of money. Right.
All right. I've got a Hyperspace Thrawn. That's fine. I've never opened one of these. I haven't even been present when people are watching these. Like, so many people at Guardian had boxes of these, and I bunch of shinies. Lightspeed Assault. I don't even think. Man, can we come back and just talk about how wild? So actually, you buy everything in singles. You wouldn't know. The increased number of legendaries has led to such a rapid decrease. Like, I feel like this set more than any other, there are so many rares I don't have. Like, just $1 cards that I don't have because close the shield gate. All right. I got a foil Prestige. Look at that shiny.
Okay. That's a nice looking card.
Radiant 7.
Yeah.
I think that's the card. Let's see here. Just a lot of hyperspace uncommons. Nothing too stand out. Yeah. There we go. Too much money for the foil Prestige Radiant 7. We're going to do 2 of these tonight, dear listener, and then we will return to the actual math. But man, Ned, I had this idea like
you did a really good job of hiding it in your back pocket. I was not expecting to be ambushed
this
with
was
like
not.
crass
I will tell you, we have
consumerism.
some dear listeners who've cottoned on to us, Ned. This was not my idea. This was a dear listener who has asked to remain unnamed. Suggested it, and as soon as I heard the idea, I was like, yeah, that's exactly how friends roll. So Hyperspace Akbar, I like, just like, it's not worth the money, but just like the convenience of getting an absolute lock on your hyperspace leaders. Shiny. I mean, it's just a lot of shiny uncommons. It's fine. And then there we go. Man, they did spend the money on the prestiges. Houndstooth in Yellow Villainy, a card I will probably never run.
No. Why?
Hyperspace Fleet Interdictor, increasingly one of my favorite cards from the set.
You were playing that this evening.
A lot of hyperspaces. It's really nice. No rares, no legendaries. There we go. 2 prestige cards. Ned, how do you feel?
I mean, it is what it is, and whoever did this is obviously knows me too well, and so this is brutal. But I think this is also a lesson. So like, if you're on the fence about buying a Carbonite pack, right? Like, think of what Parker just opened.
No legendaries.
No legendaries. You opened a Prestige Akbar, a Hyperspace Akbar, a Prestige Houndstooth, a Prestige whatever that yellow ship is.
Radiant 7. Man, you should be running
7.
Radiant 7. It's awesome.
It's a good card. Yeah, no, I think that I will. I'm just fooling around with the.
But no,
right
comparing the MSRP to the ability to get those, you're really, it's just moved the showcase chasing of normal boxes to the serial hunting in Carbonite boxes. But that's the, if you get a serial, then your box is,
it's paid
then
for.
You beat EV, and otherwise you probably aren't. But again, you cannot put a value on watching your friends squirm. So that is Mr. Suitcase, our new recurring segment.
Are you going to have like a Mr. Suitcase jingle?
If I can find one on the internet, yes.
Listeners, if any of you are musically inclined, get in the comments.
Yes. Okay, and so now we have 3 more probably short-ish segments. The meat and potatoes, though, are 2 Magic the Gathering words that I have refused to investigate so that Ned can teach me if you don't know, dear listener, he can teach you as well. Ned, tell me about
Mulldrifters and Baneslayers.
Mulldrifters and Baneslayers.
All right, so this is a Magic terminology where a Mulldrifter is a card that realizes its value immediately. So you might think of like events as realizing their value immediately, but we're talking about units that when you play the unit, you get the value from playing the unit immediately. So typically these are units that have strong comes into play effects. They might have other things. So for example, like a strong Sentinel unit might be an example of a Mulldrifter, although that's less of like a classical Mulldrifter. But the core idea behind a Mulldrifter is you play the unit and you get the value right now. And then a Baneslayer is a unit that realizes its value over turns. Typically, it is a unit that realizes its value by attacking. And I think that one of the things that Tyler talked about was how
this is
kind of hard.
His most recent article.
Yes, where he's talking about like how it's hard out there for mid-range, right? And I think that part of the reason for that, and this is also just like a design pattern, is that the amount of Baneslayers in an average mid-range deck is relatively large, and Baneslayers typically struggle in formats where there's a lot of control because you're able to answer them with events or with other things before they can realize their value. So to talk about, I think the Mulldriftiest of Mulldrifter cards right now, I'm just going to look
in Star Wars
at
Unlimited.
In Star Wars Unlimited, yes. In Star Wars Unlimited, I think that like a really good example of a Mulldrifter card is something like IG 2000, where like when it enters play, it deals damage. Another one is P38, the Starfighter, or Relentless Raider, where these all their prime. You get a body that's attached to them, and generally the body is like not bad, but they're realizing their effects as soon as they come into play. Can you think of one in like a heroism space? I don't play heroism very much, but like a card that like Luke Skywalker, I guess, is kind of a Mulldrifter.
Luke Skywalker is pretty. No, I mean,
he's got a good body attached,
but again, he's got a big body with a Restore 3. So actually, the new contracted Hunter is, I think, probably the Mulldriftiest card.
Yes.
Mulldriftiest unit, assuming that all events are inherently.
Yeah, no. Events are in their own category. We're talking about units, right?
Then I think the new contracted Hunter, the 3 for 4/4 ambush that dies at the end of the round.
Kills itself. Yeah.
That's right. Like you're getting all the value on play.
All the value
it's essentially a same arena open fire for yellow, which is what that needed.
Yeah, and the more lethal an environment is, that is, the less time that units stick around in general, the better a Mulldrifter is because you're realizing the value now. In contrast, a Baneslayer, I think that of Poe Dameron as being like the Baneslayeriest Baneslayer, right? Like, and before you say, but people ECL him into play, and I think that that's one of the strengths of Ambush is that it allows you to turn your Baneslayers into Mulldrifters, right?
I mindful that I just learned what these terms meant moments ago.
Right.
But I'm mapping them in my head to our previous conversation about tempo versus value. Early on, single digit episode.
Yeah.
I mean, Poe demands an answer.
Yes.
But I think something. I think some things like Snoke or Avenger, like blue, seems to be home.
Snoke and Avenger, I don't think of as being real.
Oh, because they don't have to attack?
Some benefit. Yeah, it's basically that they get their value when they come down and when they attack, right? And this is one of the kind of keys to a lot of modern card design, right?
Poe is Baneslayeriest because he has no real impact upon entering the board.
Yes, and when you play Poe, Poe demands a response from your opponent, and if your opponent can't answer it, you realize a huge amount of value potentially. But if your opponent can answer it with like a 1-for-1 or some other like clean answer, you realize no value.
Got it.
Right, like that is the kind of core identity of the Baneslayer.
Okay, I see. And so like Crate, even though Crate doesn't technically do anything on entering the battlefield, it does create an aura, so that even if they most efficiently resolve it, it does more than
it gets some value.
Advantage.
Yeah. where like a pure Baneslayer is a card that if your opponent immediately kills it with a kill effect, you have realized 0 value.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. The Poe, maybe like Relentless, but again, there's that aura. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll accept Poe.
Yeah.
For the sake of argument, Poe is the Baneslayeriest card in Star Wars Unlimited.
And the reason why I wanted to talk about this, beyond just like these are useful terms, is twofold. First is a deck building idea, and this was talked about in Next Level Deck Building, and that is every Baneslayer that you add makes your other Baneslayers better. And the reason for that is that if each thing is demanding more and more clean removal to answer, then at some point your opponent is going to run out of clean removal and your Baneslayer will get through. So you can always add Mulldrifters to a deck. You can always add cards that recognize their value now. But when you adding one Baneslayer to a deck of all Mulldrifters, that Baneslayer is going to do very poorly. But the more
arguably makes your deck worse than just
yes,
another Mulldrifter.
It will probably, it's displacing something else, right?
Because everybody's packing one answer to one
Right.
question.
Right. And then, to go back just a little bit, there is also a third typology of units, and those are like, I would call them poopers, right? Where these are units that they exist.
This does not feel like
a
term that was coined in the same...
No, it is not a next level magic term, but it is an addendum, and the idea is that these are cheap, crummy units that exist for the purpose of doing damage, and like you don't care if they get removed because they are cheaper than your opponent's removal.
Right. This is the new Vader Swarm deck, or
yeah, exactly.
Sabine, or
like,
whatever.
Yeah, Sabine. Like Sabine, even in Sabine, you have some Mulldrifters, and you have
but the Vader deck is just cranking 1/1 tokens. Like
those are just poopers. They're
okay. That's right.
Yeah, but so there's this deck building idea, and it's something that I do want people to visit, and this is particularly notable in mid-range decks because a lot of powerful mid-range cards tend to be either Mulldrifters or Baneslayers or both. Like they have the features of both. And this is also why Ambush is such a powerful effect, is it allows you to turn your Baneslayers into Mulldrifters. So a good example of this, I think, is Wrecker, right? Like Wrecker is a like half and half card where you're getting value right away. If you, assuming you're not ambushing him in, he's gonna kill something right away with his, and then when he attacks, he's a big dangerous body with overwhelm, right?
Right.
But if you combine these two effects, when you ambush him in, you get the Baneslayer and the Mulldrifter effect. And another like design pattern is when it enters and on attack. So like, Avenger, when played and on attack, you get the value. So it's getting the Mulldrifter and the Baneslayer value. But there's a tendency there. I see that most in cards that are farther up the cost chain, right? Like you see those with Avengers. You don't tend to see those in the like 4 to 6 bucket. And I think that this is one of the challenges for mid-range decks is right now in the 4 to 6 cost bucket. And that this is me opining a little bit, and we'll see how the meta shakes out. But in the 4 to 6 cost bucket, most of the good units tend to be more Baneslayery than Mulldrifty. Particularly for mid-range decks. So when I'm looking at Django is a deck that I know very well. In Django, you're playing like IG 2000. You're playing, Relentless Raider. You're playing the
Fire Spray.
Fet's Fire Spray. You're playing the War, the new Red War Thunder
Juggernaut.
War Juggernaut. Yeah.
Yeah, and those all have it. Those are all the hybrids. They all have it.
Yeah.
I mean, especially given that if you're in Django, especially a deployed Django, the IG 2000 and the War Juggernaut are just kind of obscene. But even just doing a bunch of damage right out of the gate is an immediate effect. And then
and let's look at like Ray Red, right? So let's look at Ray Red or Anakin. So what 4s, 5s, and 6s did you run in Ray Red?
In Ray Red, I mean, so you're running Poe, obviously, which is pure
very Baneslayery.
You might the 4, 5s, and 6s, you're running um, the those 2/6 Sentinels for 4.
Yeah, the
Um,
Nima outpost constables. Yeah,
Nemo Outpost
and
Constables.
those, Sentinel units are kind of Mulldrifty, where
That's
they're
the
some of
aura
their value.
effect. They don't do
Yes, that
something,
aura
but they
effect.
change the state of the game.
They change the state of the game, but they're less dramatic than like dealing damage straight up, right?
Yeah.
Like if your opponent's in a different lane, if the stats don't line up well, you're not realizing value from those. Is there like another mid-range deck that you feel comfortable talking to?
Hero, red, and blue, I do feel suffers a little in the 4 to 6 cost because you're running thing. I mean, you've got K2SO,
Right.
which
Which is
generally
kind of
considered to
Mulldrifty
be a,
because he does get some value when he dies, but he's also, it's not like a huge value. Three
right.
damage is on death is 3 base damage on death is not that exciting, right?
And I think he's increasingly used for the discard. I mean, reach if
Yeah.
you're going aggro, but like if you're playing a mid-rangey deck, you're much more interested in removing an option.
Right.
You've got Kanan Jarrus, which I
Pure
don't love
Baneslayer. Yeah.
pure Baneslayer. You've got Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, Sentinel, but all that value on death, but again,
Yeah.
isn't like immediately moving you forward. It's throwing
Yeah.
a rock. That's the 4 to 6,
Yeah.
right? Like I didn't. My Ray Red didn't even run any space 4 to 6, which again,
You
old
didn't run
meta.
Razor Crest?
No,
No. Yeah, because it's 3 power. Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
old meta, but
Right. Yeah.
so yeah, there's not it's not a happy space
Right.
for a lot of. I mean, that's 2 colors of heroism right there that just
Right.
don't have.
And
any-
I think that get in the comments. Another deck that we're going to look at is Quinlan, right? So like Red 3 is at the 3 cost, but it's more Baneslayery than it is Mulldrifty, where you're needing to attack with other units to get like value from it. Kira is a Mulldrifter, and then you don't have any units. You've got Plo Koon, but Plo Koon is a pure Mulldrifter in that he's ambushing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the place where Hero has struggled, is that it's aggro or like it's shenanigan mid range. It's not like dudes on a board mid range, which is weird in a game that is about
Designed to be
they've
dudes on a
clearly
board.
pushed
Yeah.
dudes on a board.
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah.
looking at decks like Han, which is all about like I'm stealing your that's just like that's just an aggro deck that uses shenanigans to get big stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that's been my big struggle. Is I'm naturally inclined to play heroism a little more than villainy, but like mid range is pretty strongly right now in villainy.
Right. And so just from a design standpoint, I think that this is interesting. And typically the ways that you resolve this are that you make you don't want to make everything a Mulldrifter, because when you make everything a Mulldrifter, like Baneslayers are an interesting, exciting niche. Like people like playing Baneslayers. They're fun to play.
I mean, it's the good stuff deck, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to throw down a good thing that will just derive value over time.
Yeah. So like traditionally the design solutions have been you like add a little bit of Mulldrifty spice to your Baneslayers so that they can
This
get
is
a little
you
bit of
being
value.
a designer, like not.
This is me as a
in your
designer,
deck.
right?
Okay.
Right. When you're deck building, you work with the cards that you've got, right? But as a designer, I wouldn't be surprised if they lean a little bit more into death triggers or other ways that you can get value that aren't like pure Mulldrifty, but like K2SO or Yoda, I think, show units that can have that Mulldrifty kind of effect where they're not answered cleanly by 1-for-1 removal. They're not actual Mulldrifters because you're not seeing the value right when you play them, but they're also not answered cleanly by 1-for-1 removal. And then the other thing is protection. So some kind of an effect to make it more difficult for them to be removed. So we haven't really seen that kind of an effect, like outside of Lurking TIE Phantom. We don't see a lot of that effect. And I think that I would be interested going forward if that design space is not explored. But it's also a dangerous design space because when you have a Baneslayer with protection, it starts to become more and more difficult for control decks to survive. And so, yeah,
No,
it's just an
pretty
interesting
fascinating.
design
I think
problem.
that's one of the
And
mildly. I mean, Tyler alluded to that with the
Yeah.
newest Chewbacca pilot, but up until now, a lot of those can't be attacked, can't be hurt, are things like Sabine or lurking, which are small. And
Yes.
Chewie is both possibly a mid-range body or turns a small ship into a mid-range ship.
And gives it protection, right?
And
that,
gives it protection,
gives
yeah.
protection, right?
And that's
so,
the biggest protection we've seen yet.
Yes, yeah. And so I just thought that was interesting in the space of that's interesting. I wanted to talk to that.
I would love more value from my good stuff.deck. So I hope all of those Bane Slayers get protection and Mulldriftery and no, it's nice when you get like my favorite deck, as I've said, is always Elves, where and Slivers, right? Decks where it's like you put out a little bit of good stuff that just keeps accruing more and more good stuff.
Accruing value, right? Yeah.
Like pure value town, which does not always do well.
No.
But all right. I believe if that's the end of Mulldrifters.
That's the end of that segment.
Slayers, the next segment is That's Not How the Force Works.
That's not how the Force works.
How does the Force work, Ned?
Not that way. But we actually had 2 listener comments, and so we're going to address them each independently. So the first one that I wanted to address was we had a listener email us who asked about Restore and why Restore feels a lot better in SWU than it does in other card games. So
I love that question. Did you write down who asked it, Ned?
If we can edit this briefly,
I will put it on the bottom of the screen. Thank you, dear listener. I clearly don't check our email unless Ned pings me on Discord and says, "Did you see the email?" So we are working on getting new listener comments. So thank you, dear listener, Rob Jarvis. We will we'll get into that.
Insert your name here. Yeah.
So but I absolutely adore that question because I love Restore. I always think more life is good, and it normally isn't, and yet it clinches games in SWU.
Yeah, and I think that has to do with 2 features of SWU. So the first is the alternating actions, and the second is that attacker chooses defenders. So let's talk about these 2 things in turn. So the first thing I want to talk about is the second thing that I mentioned, which is attacker chooses defenders. So because attacker chooses defenders, you can always attack your opponent's face. Because you can always attack your opponent's face, every game has a risk of turning into a race. And so because every game has a risk of turning into a race, you always need to be very aware of what your life total is, or what your base health is. Because fundamentally, most games in a lot of other card games don't turn into races. There are some matchups that do turn into races. So, for example, if you play a lot of aggro versus aggro matchups, those tend to turn into races because neither person has cards that are good at stopping your opponent from attacking. But in a defender chooses, as long as you have units alive, you can protect yourself from your opponent's units, generally, right? And so because as long as you can have units alive, you can protect yourself, it means that you are going to tend to run out of cards to protect yourself with before you run out of base health, where the proximate cause of your losing is your life going to 0, your base health going to 0, but the true cause of your losing is you did not have cards with which to defend yourself. And in SWU, there are very few cards that you can use to defend yourself. Those cards generally take the form of sentinel units. And then the other cards that you use to defend yourself are your units, but your units aren't protecting you. Your units are protecting you by attacking your opponent's units.
As they say, Ned, if either of us had ever played sports, the best defense is a good offense.
Yes, exactly. So, because of this dynamic, every game has a risk of turning into a race. And because every game has a risk of turning into a race, any incidental base health that you are getting from restore is counting double, right? Like if you're attacking your restore unit into your opponent's base, you're going faster in the race and then they're going slower because you're restoring some health. But even if you're attacking their unit, you are removing their unit and you are also gaining health. So you are protecting yourself two different ways. And so because of that, restore has a lot more value in SWU than it does in other card games, because the proximate cause of your death in SWU is generally not not the proximate cause, but the true cause is generally not running out of cards. The true cause of your death is that your opponent was able to deal damage to you faster than you were able to deal damage to them.
Okay, I have thoughts, but I want to first let you, the other note that you had
is the alternating actions, right? And so because of alternating actions, this ties into the attacker chooses defenders. Because of alternating actions, it is frequently the case that you could stabilize if you had more time, right? Like a really common thing that gets new players in SWU is your opponent attacks and then you do something and then they claim initiative, right? And they're just going to attack you again. So if they've got like a big unit, they can deal twice that unit's power in damage to your base before you maybe have the opportunity to do anything, unless you had the answer right then. And
as
so,
a Timmy, which means inherently a new player, despite how much I learned the game, the having to claim with a bunch of ready units on the board in order to prevent them from claiming is such a
it's great. It's a beautiful tension. Yeah, no, it's good design. It's a very interesting decision. Making that decision, it's a very, very interesting decision. And games are made up of interesting decisions. And so I think that is a really fascinating part of SWU. But this goes into restore, because restore is acting as action compression, where when you are attacking with a unit that has restore, you are doing two things. You are, number one, doing whatever you need to do with that unit, and number two, you are healing your base. That is giving you more room to try and stabilize. So you are doing what you need to do, and in two different ways, and that is action compression, and that is just a powerful effect. So this is kind of the twofold reason why restore is very good.
So I personally, as somebody who does not view my life as a resource, but as something to be cherished and nurtured, I love restore, but healing in SWU doesn't feel any better than it does in other games. Like, it feels kind of like a necessary evil for certain decks. Like, I run 2 top targets in my Piet currently, but like nobody wants to repair.
Yes, because pure life. So this kind of goes back to it. One of the reasons why there's this piece of advice that your life total doesn't matter in other games is that people tend to prioritize effects that are pure life game, that do nothing but restore your base health. And those are typically bad, because if we go back to this idea of like the immediate cause of you losing is your health going to 0, your base health going up to your base damage going up to whatever your base health is. But
it's not convenient to say that the same way. Like, damage goes up but there's no way
no, there's not a convenient way.
Your remaining health goes to 0. So
yes, your remaining health goes to 0.
Okay.
So that is the proximate cause of you losing, but there is another cause, and that generally other cause is you are not using your resources efficiently, right? Like the in SWU, typically, you're not running out of cards as often as you are in other games because of draw 2. The thing that you are more running out of is resources, like the resources both like in your resource row, but also on the board, like your board advantage and your resources. And when you are spending your resources for something that just is restoring your base health, then you are spending resources for something that is neither getting you more resources to spend, nor is it advancing your position on the board. Because you might need to run some of them as a necessary evil to keep you from losing. But this is, again, where Restore is such a powerful ability, is that Restore combines something that you want to be doing, which is spending your resources on units and then using those units to attack. But also, it is doing the secondary thing. And this also ties back to, I think, a misperception, which is a lot of people say, like, life gain is bad in other games. And it's life gain is good as long as you're doing other things. And the doing other things is the big part.
So it's good as a rider.
It's good as a rider, right? But not as the sole thing. And I think that that's also true in SWU, but because Restore is, by definition, a rider, it is good.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's why I think Luke continues to be probably one of the best hero top ends, is just because tying in both of our things, you get that Mulldrifter effect on Enter the battle. Yeah. But then he's just, I mean, Restore 3.
That's a lot.
That's
right?
a lot.
Yeah. And it's a big body, right? So you've got the Baneslayer plus Mulldrifter that has incidental base health Restore. And I think another thing that's really great about Restore as a design is because it happens on attack, you are strongly encouraged to attack with your units, which is what you should be doing anyway. You're like, in general, the design and Tyler talks about this, and I think that the team does a really good job with this, is they want you to attack with your units. Your units exist to attack with, so everything in the design is pointing you towards attacking with your units into something.
As a final note on this subject, before we move on to our other dear listener question, and you can listen to the keyboard as Ned frantically finds out the name of the person who asked it, this came up when Yoda got previewed, like the original Yoda unit got previewed. And I don't feel like it gets discussed enough now because we've all internalized it, but I do think from a Restore from a design space, credit to the team for being smart enough or having enough foresight to make Restore not lifelink, right? To make Restore a defined number unrelated to the strength of the unit. That surprise striking something with Restore doesn't give you more health. I think that was a niche and clever choice that it prevents things from getting, I mean, Restore is fine just as is with 1 or 2, and you don't have things running away where, not a 9-point health swing.
Oh yeah, no, it would just be completely ridiculous.
Would be ridiculous, despite that being totally a thing that can happen in other games. Ned, we have 2 listener question comments.
Yes, we do. So the second one came in via Blue Sky from Count Swooku. So thank you, Count Swooku, for reaching out. And this has to do with tournament tiebreaks.
Aha. Okay. Yes. So I had some reservations when Count Swooku asked this on Blue Sky. I remember this. And so I'm going to ask up front, Ned, are we talking about like White Room stuff, or are we talking about, the Melee.gg Fantasy Flight partnership tiebreaks?
The answer is both. Okay. So this is a White Room
simulation. We can't say no to a White Room. Like, it's just there and empty.
It's so clean. This is a White Room simulation. Yes. So the question is, if you lose in the first round versus losing in the last round, they were under the impression that losing in the first round can sometimes be an advantage to your tiebreakers versus losing in the last round. And that's a tough question to answer. But I have a Monte Carlo tournament simulator that I wrote for a while ago when we were talking about Boba Fett being the menace.
You made your bones.
Yeah, I also made my bones doing Monte Carlo. And I looked up the official Melee.gg Star Wars Unlimited tiebreakers, and I implemented as best I could, the Melee.gg official. So I don't know about their precise.
I acknowledge. So I
Yeah.
acknowledge that the legal profession as we know it may not exist for much longer. So while I have these skills left, I have to say, as best you could.
So
How
as
much
best I
zhuzhing was
could,
going on here, Ned?
very little. So I implemented them exactly as they said. Now, there is probably going to be some additional layer that is not discussed. And that might be like if two players have exactly the same tiebreak score, you need a uniform way to resolve that tiebreak score. But to go through...
Is that left up to the TO or something?
It's not stated.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go through reading. I'm not going to read the whole Melee.gg website. They have a percentage floor, which I did not fully implement.
Okay.
But the order of tiebreakers is as follows. Number 1, match wins. So you look at the player who has won more matches. The player who has won more matches has a higher tiebreak score than the player who has won fewer matches. In the event that match wins are tied, you look at opponent match win percentage, which is you look at the percentage of match wins that were done by an opponent faced by the players. The player who has faced opponents who have more match wins is got a higher tiebreak score than the player who has a lower opponent match win.
This is
percentage.
for dear listeners who aren't super competitive, which includes me. This is referred to as strength of schedule. So
Yeah.
how good of players did you play?
Number 3 is player game win percentage. So that is the number of games that you won. So if you won all of your games 2-0, you have a
games,
higher
not matches. Got it.
games. If you won your games 2-0, you will have a higher percentage, a higher tiebreak than a player that won their games 2-1.
Oh, that's
But this is the
fascinating.
layer
so
3.
If somebody else plays somebody who's goes 2-1 against a net pool that is slightly stronger than the ones you shut out 2-0, I guess I agree with that. I just find that mildly surprising, but yeah, that makes
Right.
sense. Okay, so number
right,
3
and
is how much did you dominate? Okay,
How much did you dominate? And number 4 is how much did your opponents dominate? Opponents game win percentage.
okay, yeah.
So that is how much did your opponents dominate? So this is done in a 4 rank ordered 4 things. So I implemented that in the code, which I will be committing to the GitHub immediately after this podcast is done. And you are welcome to poke at it and prod at it and make whatever alterations you suggest. But basically, I implemented those. So for every play, and then I constructed a random simulated tournament where we have one player who is our special player. Our special player, I will either the special player has, depending on how I have the particular simulation run, I will designate a match, and they were guaranteed to lose that match. So, for example, match number 1 or match number 7, whichever of these 2 matches, we're comparing and we're doing like a 7-round tournament, either you're losing match 1 or you're losing match 7. Or any other match if you want. You can adjust it. You can futz with it however you want. The second thing is that I can make this player the best player in that other than the magic match, which I force them to lose, I can set them to be winning all of their games, or I can just do it as a coin flip. And so I have run it both ways, where either they are a coin flip to win, or they are the magic player, and so because they are the magic player, other than the game that they are fated, other than the match they are fated to lose, they will win every single other game, and therefore they will win every single other match.
Okay.
And then for all of the opponents, I made all the opponents a series of coin flips, so that every other player in the tournament is a coin flip. When 2 players play each other, I flip a coin. If it's heads, one player wins. If it's tails, the other player wins.
Right. Okay.
And then I do this 5,000 times for a bunch of different outcomes for like different conditions. And I compare if I force them to lose match 1 or if I force them to lose match 7, what is their final position in the rank ordered list of player rankings? And that will bring us to chart number 1.
That's the
So
this one, the X.
The X, yes, the X position is what position did they end up in. The Y is out of the 5,000 occurrences.
No, sorry, Ned. This is the chart where the orange is slanting down to the right and the blue is slanting.
Blue is slanting up and to the right. Yes, exactly. Yep. Yep, that describes it. So the blue is if you lose in round 1, you are more likely to end up lower than if you lose in round 7. Now, this is not uniformly true. You can see that in some percentage of the simulations, losing in round 1 still ended.
So this is
you up.
occurrences in 5,000 for the Magic player.
Yes, this is occurrences in 5,000 for the Magic player. For the player who has been dubbed our hero, this
is a player who will win every game other than
this is a player that will win every game. I have said
I
that if you are guaranteed to win every game other than your fated game. You are guaranteed to win every game other than the games in your fated match. Your fated match, you are guaranteed to lose 2-0.
So if you're fated to lose the orange graph, you're fated to lose on round 7. You're guaranteed to win 1 and 2, which makes sense. If you win 1 and 2, you're oh, I see. Okay, so you're likely to do very well if you don't lose until the end.
Right.
Okay.
You are likely to do very well if you don't. If you win every game if you win every match other than your first match, you are very likely to do pretty darn well. Similarly, if you win every match, win every match but your last match, you are very likely to do very well. If you win every match but your first match, you are likely to do well, but less well than if you.
And this is to be clear before the breaks.
This is. I have not done any top 8 cut. This is
obviously the person who loses their last match, if we're including the breaks, is the second place player. We're talking just the Swiss.
Yes, this is just the Swiss. We're just saying, I'm simulating Swiss. I'm simulating 7 rounds of Swiss.
Yep,
Either you lose match 1 or you lose match 7. You win literally every other game. And where do you finish in the rank ordered list of where people fall? And the answer is you tend to do better if you lose your last match than if you lose your first match. Now, it's not complete. There are some outcomes where somebody did better losing. I can't simulate a counterfactual.
Am I reading this correctly, though? If you lose on round 1, you're almost definitely not coming in final player position 1.
Yes, that is correct.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you're a player who's, say, towards the middle, am I reading this correctly?
This is, in general, you are probably going to finish in the top 8. It is not guaranteed that you're going to finish in the top 8, but if you only lose one match and that one match is whichever match I decree, the later the match is, the better you tend to do. It is not guaranteed, but it is a very strong and obvious trend that you can see here. And then I ran the same simulation with coin flipping, where instead of it being that you are
this is slightly more reflective, I think, of reality.
Yes, the second one is more reflective of reality, and this is I'm assuming that every game is a coin flip for you, other than your fated game, other than the games in your fated match. I'm sorry, I have to be very precise about the language because it's the way that it works. But if every other game is a coin flip other than games in your fated match, you still tend to, and this is the one where you've got 2 lines that are kind of layered over each other, but you can see that the yellow line has more of its mass towards the left than the blue. Where the blue is if you're losing in the first, you're guaranteed to lose in the first round, and the yellow is if you're guaranteed to lose in the 7th round. I kind of coarse-grained the buckets a little bit.
Why is the player position 1 through 7 on 1 and?
Because if you're always winning, you probably are doing very well, right? The x-axis, yes. Yeah.
Right. Even if you lose the first one,
if you're coin flipping, you're gonna finish in the bottom. If you are guaranteed to lose one match and then every other match is a coin flip, odds are that you will finish in the bottom half of a 128 player tournament.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're going to
because
do worse.
you are guaranteed to lose one match, and then you will lose half of your other matches.
Yeah. Okay. So the takeaway though is that that there are specific circumstances where submarining, meaning losing the first and then continuing, right? That's submarining is coming up.
That is submarining. Yeah, that is the term of art.
That it is possible that it is not something you should rely on.
It is generally non-favorable. I would recommend against doing it. I would not throw my first match. Now, probably
shouldn't throw any matches.
One ought not to. But I have made an assumption here. And the assumption that I have made here is that every player is of equal skill level and that every match is resolved via coin flip. Now, the argument in favor, the strongest argument that of my understanding that I know of in favor of submarining says if you lose your first match, you are playing against weaker players going forward. And so you are more likely to end up, again, if we look at that fourfold, you are more likely to end up with a higher number of match wins because more of your games are not coin flips. More of your games are
so would that be favorable in a smaller tournament? Because in a larger tournament, you're going to be like running against averages where the strength of schedule starts to hurt you. But in a smaller tournament, you're more likely to have the actual breaker be number of matches won.
Yes. And so this is where I have made an assumption, and that assumption might not match reality. Because I have assumed that in my fake tournament, all players are equally skilled. I do not care to do some kind of a simulation wherein we have like bad players and good players. What one could add epicycles onto this, but to the extent that this is an interesting question as opposed to a do breakers favor you if you lose first versus if you lose seventh, the answer is not if all players are equally skilled.
If you want to see Ned run it again with good players and bad players, get in the comments.
Yes.
I want to know if because I think that feels like an answerable question, not to sign you up for more math, Ned, but size of tournament versus like if you are a grinder showing up to a small tournament where you think there are some people who confuse this PQ for a showdown.
Yeah.
Like that might be don't throw, but
right. No, but I mean, and this goes into here, like,
we're not advocating anybody ever say that.
No, you one ought not to. Beyond that, like, the first order is your match wins. So you ought to try and win as many matches as possible, right? The entirety of this simulation is predicated on the idea that the finger of Ned comes down from the heavens and points at a particular match and says, you're going to lose this one, buddy.
Okay,
you get to pick.
Two notes.
Yeah.
One, so this is mostly about your blood pressure after losing your first match in Swiss. And two, I want to note, because I meant to I was so bummed I didn't bring this up last episode. I talk about Ned math nonstop, and Ned does not, because Ned thinks of it as math, I think is the term.
It's just math.
It's just math. But in the last episode, Ned referred to it as Ned math, and now we've got Ned's fingers coming down from the heavens. I'm just... keep getting in the comments and telling people, Ned, how much you love math. His head's just going to... Okay, so don't intentionally throw matches, but if you have to lose one, you're going to feel better the later you lose one. This tracks with what this is conventional wisdom for a reason.
That's normal behavior, right? Like, and this is, again, assuming that all players are equally skilled. So don't yell at me if you have the theory that it doesn't track to reality. This was a semi-white room simulation, but we can.
If Melee.gg ran and Cascade Games ran a tournament in a white room,
yes,
this is what would happen
with identically equally skilled players. Yes.
Okay, dear listener, I owe you an apology as we pass the 1 hour mark because I said 4 segments and we actually have 3. If we had 2 questions in our. That is not how the Force works. So there's an argument to be made that is 3 segments plus our 0th segment, but I'm okay with that because there were 2 fantastic questions.
Absolutely.
I think that's everything, Ned. I think that's all she wrote.
I think that is all she wrote.
All right. Dear listener, this was episode number 32. Again, we're recording on Pi Day. If you have any thoughts about the episode, get in the comments, send an email to Ned. If Ned, do you have any thoughts about the episode? You should say them now.
Yes, I do. And that is, if you like hearing me talk about math and games, I will be giving a 45-minute presentation at Unpub, the Unpublished Games Festival, at the end of March about math and game design. This will be recorded, and you will get, I will be plugging the Force Unlimited there, to
Awesome.
the extent that I'm allowed by the organizers.
To bring it back to the beginning with Venn diagrams, I was going to say the Venn diagram of people who listen to the show who are going to Unpub is probably the same Venn diagram of the people who are on the show who are going to Unpub. It's probably a narrow, I mean, that's maybe not
It's
fair
a pretty
to
narrow
those,
slice.
But the number of people who might actually go look it up if it were recorded, I think is there's more overlap in that nexus. That's all she wrote, dear listener. We will see you in a few weeks.
Adios.